electricity in it, I feel excited in a mild way, the way I might have felt excited when I was 18, looking across the room at whoever I was in love with. That kind of excitement can come about when you are looking at something that truly interests you and that truly speaks to you, even if it's something new. So, I'm referring to things that I know I'm interested in, and I keep a lookout for new things in neuroscience. And I'm kind of disappointed when I haven't found anything new for a while. And when I do find something new, I don't mean a new article about something I already know, but a new article or a new talk or a new book about something I don't yet know related to a bunch of other things that I already know. You see? So I'm filling in bits of information into those arenas. And this is a way of keeping your brain growing. Similar to another thing you can do is to challenge your brain. I did a number of videotaped courses that are sold on the internet. And in order to do that, the subject matter I knew about, like coming here today and talking about this subject matter. But I had to learn a whole new technology in order to be able to videotape myself, convert those into the format that the company that sells them online requires, put in some music and do whatever I had to do and edit out the bits that were no good. Well, that was a learning curve. It may not have taken very long, but I know that that particular learning curve made my brain grow. And every time I do something like that, a couple of years ago, I became keto. Keto means I don't eat grains and sugar and processed food. And I had to learn a new way of baking bread, for example, because the bread I want, I can't find in a store. Gluten-free, I don't eat it. That bread is very bad, the stuff they sell you in the health food stores. So I had to learn how to do that. I'm not a great, baker, but I wanted bread, so I had to learn how to make it. Learning curve, little one, but still, etc., etc. Now, science has also told us that even just physical activity, aerobic physical activity, so we're not talking here weights. Weights are good, but for other reasons. But for the brain and the growth of new cells, the mere activity of walking, doesn't have to be fast, doesn't have to be whatever, just walking, creates new brain cells. This has been scientifically proven, and you've probably read numbers of articles about it. And I want to tell you a little story here. So it's not only the physical activity with your muscles that creates the new brain cells, but it is also this. Imagine you always walk on the paseo that starts at Puente Romano, and you walk to the beginning of Marbella. And then you walk back and you get in your car and you go home. Or wherever you do your paseo, your walk. Doesn't matter, but I'm just using the paseo as an example. Well, that was kind of my story. And then one day somebody mentioned, oh, they're finishing the paseo out towards Estepona. So I go and explore. And I'm walking on this rather long paseo that I've never walked on before. And I noticed how curious my brain was about everything I was seeing. I mean, I was just mainly seeing the sea and some urbanizations, some very expensive urbanizations, and other people walking, a few restaurants, etc., etc. So it wasn't that I was seeing things that were so interesting, but they were things I wasn't familiar with. So of course, just like if you go to a new city and you're exploring the new city, your brain cells are growing simply because you are looking at something new. You're learning to manage your way through something new, even though in this case it was straight up and straight down, right? An hour that way and an hour this way. But it is very important to also vary what we do. And then another point about learning and making brain cells grow, when you learn a new way of doing something that you've done for a long time, in order to, let's say, improve your performance, you're also growing new brain cells. And I'm going to come to a very big example about this a little later on. But all of those things, as I say, can contribute to your new growth of brain cells. But like I say, you have to do it. We get lazy, we don't want to do things, we are set in our patterns, and then we don't do it. So, like I say, This is about motivating yourself. Around 2004, so we started in 1980 where they came up with the geriatric studies and they realized the brain has plasticity. And then they, in maybe the 90s, they realized the brain can grow new cells. Now in 2004, they discovered something else that blew everybody's mind. And you probably have heard about this, so it's not going to blow your mind. They realized we not only have a brain here, the one that sits inside our skull, we have another brain here in the gut, which is called the second brain, and they also call it the intuitive brain. Now, this second brain has billions of neural cells, just like the billions of cells that are up here. But these guys are the rational ones. These guys are the gut, the intuitive ones, but not the way they used to laugh at women and say, "Ah, that's women's intuition," right? This is evidence-based science. Yes?
So if I'm allowed to ask a question, you know how they discovered octopus have
Yes.
have two brains? Is it the same? Do they also have an intuitive brain in there?
I don't know enough. I've seen those articles about the octopi, but I have not read enough about it to be able to answer your question intelligently. Sorry. Okay, so our second brain, this intuitive or gut brain in the intestinal region, frequently receives information before this one does, and I'll show you how it happens. Let's say I've just met Heather for the very first time, and for some reason, when I look, which is not the case by the way, Heather, but for some reason, when I look at Heather and they're about to introduce us, I'm feeling a little weird in my stomach, and I'm probably beginning to think, ooh, this lady, what's wrong with her? But all based on nothing, right? Just me having looked at her. But this weirdness in my stomach are my gut cells reacting. And then they send that information up here, and I now have the thought, what's with this woman? Maybe I then have the next thought, she looked at me strangely. Maybe she gave me one of those once-over looks. Again, not the case, obviously. But you see, the information entered here. It didn't enter here. It was taken up here. And of course, they have taken all kinds of scans to show this. Information hits here, these cells react, and it goes up to the brain. Now, it may be Heather and I become very good friends. Despite that, right? Despite this little thingy at the beginning in my own system. And perhaps 5 years down the road, she betrays me in the worst of all ways. Sorry, I'm using you as an example. I now may remember my initial rejection of something about her. That might have been, and I'm not saying anybody you feel like this about, that you should not have contact with them. I'm just saying, sometimes we get a greater intelligence of piece of intelligent information through the gut than through the rational brain. And in my own life, this has happened. You know, I may have had a situation with somebody, and I go back to those early moments, and I remember something of the type I've just described here. And of course, you can find it all throughout the literature. So then, they weren't finished with just the second brain. They then realized we have a third one, the heart brain, also filled with billions of neural cells. Now, the next part I'm going to tell you, as far as I know, is still mere speculation. This is not yet evidence-based. But this is one of the reasons they speculate that when you have a heart transplant, people frequently begin feeling things they did not feel before. I don't mean that they have memories like in some weird serial killer movies we see, but that they have feelings they didn't necessarily have before. And of course, this heart, this other person's heart, has already got all these neural cells in it that emote, that have emotion as their main pathway, if you like. So that's mere speculation, as I say. I'm not sure that that is true, or scientifically true. But what is true is that the heart brain, the gut brain, and the rational brain all have billions of neural cells. They've actually discovered we have neural cells everywhere throughout the body. But for the time being, they're talking about these three brains. And of course, the three brains have very different functions. I'm sure you've often heard people give you advice and say, well, just be rational about it. Go, look at it in a very rational way and then make your decision. Other people will say, well, go with your gut. Or other people will say, go with your heart. And whether that turns out well or doesn't turn out well, but with the information we now have, knowing that we should not belittle, denigrate, or sneer at the gut and the heart. In other words, the intuitive feelings we have and the emotional aspect of whatever it is we're looking at, we now know that you should ideally bring in all three. Let's say I'm offered a new job. I really want that new job because it gives me A, promotion, B, I will make a lot more money, and C, it will move me to a city I really like. But I'm engaged, and the person I'm engaged to lives here and for XYZ reasons will not be able to move. And then I'm kind of afraid of that new job, much as I want it, because I know that the responsibilities and challenges I will have are way beyond anything I've done before. So now my three brains might clash, or might all give me information if I look at all of these parts before I make a decision. I sure wouldn't know which decision to make if that were my case, but that is the way I would start looking at it if I had that kind of a situation in my life. So, look at this.
Just to ask you, why has society knocked out the intuition and the heart and really gone for the rational?
Oh, that's very simple.
Society really has pushed that for many, many years.
That's very simple. I believe it's very simple. The answer to that is patriarchy. But it's not men. I would say it's the culture. You can't, it's not so easy as to say this is what men have done. This is what the culture has done. So if you go back, there are beautiful mythology and let's call it pseudo-historical books. I say pseudo because it's not in the patriarchal literature and history of matriarchies that have existed throughout the world, especially if you go into pottery. And if you read I can't think of all their names right now. Anybody's interested, you send me an email and I'll give you some of the names. You read some of the books that deal with the early matriarchies, you will see how slowly, even due sometimes to treachery within the women, but also through warfare and greater strength, men took over bit by bit. And when they took over, bit by bit, we got into a patriarchal type of thinking. But then religion entered the picture. Judeo-Christianity. I don't mean the other pagan religions, but Judeo-Christianity. And, Eve, hello, it's her fault. Everything is her fault. So, mind you, there is an Eve in almost all the pagan religions. And there is a Jesus, or a Savior God. And there is a flood. You go through the pagan... I used to teach comparative mythology at University in Miami. And you go through all the pagan religions, you find so many things that are the same as in Christianity. The winter solstice, the spring solstice, the summer solstice, they're important in all of these. And they have a very similar meaning as they do in our Christianity. But back to your question, I believe that is really at the root of the answer. But I would not blame men. I would blame, if anything, the way society progressed. And anyway, it's starting to change,
That's exactly what I was just going to say, okay.
But now, last thing I want to say about the three brains. When you start thinking about these three brains and how you can make each of them work for you, especially when you're trying to take an important decision, think of it this way. Imagine you're putting a Maserati engine into a Volkswagen, one of those little Beetles. By looking at your three brains in the same way, just the knowledge you have gained today, if you didn't already know it, if we can compare your current brain to that Volkswagen,